Hi, this is Chris King. I'm Director of Product Marketing for Palo Alto Networks. I want to talk to you a little bit today about data leakage, specifically data leakage of personally identifiable information outside of enterprise organizations. Here are three examples. It does seem like we don't go a week without having some sort of announcement of some sort of enterprise leaking out information about customers or employees, their social security numbers or their credit card numbers. Here are just three examples, three recent ones. The U.S. Army in December of 2008 announced that a spreadsheet containing the personal information of 24,000 soldiers leaked out into the public domain over a peer-to-peer network. These peer-to-peer applications on Army networks are expressly prohibited. This particular one was misconfigured, so it ended up leaking out this information. Something similar happened at Walter Reed back in June of 2008, where, again, an expressly prohibited peer-to-peer file sharing application that was misconfigured leaked 1,000 patient records outside the organization. Something similar happened with Pfizer, 17,000 employees. Everyone knows that these kinds of leaks, these kinds of breaches are on the rise. Everyone knows they're expensive and they're very embarrassing for the organization. And the industry, in a lot of cases, has started to look at ways to deal with this. A lot of the organizations that we see out there are starting to look at DLP kinds of projects, but these projects are expensive, they're long-running, and start out with things like, okay, where's your data? Who owns it? How do we classify it? And those kinds of processes end up taking months and months and months. Furthermore, DLP technologies are in that toolkit phase, where you have one set of technologies that look at data at rest, another set of technologies that look at data at motion, some things look at email, but things like SSL, other types of application vectors are underserved. Now, there are a bunch of other security appliances out there that organizations might enlist. Things like IPSs, proxies, URL filtering devices. But the problem that a lot of those things have is A, they don't understand applications and therefore don't understand application content. And B, in a lot of cases, they don't see all the traffic. You look at a typical IPS, you look at a typical web proxy, they're only seeing a portion of the traffic, they're only evaluating a portion of the traffic. Furthermore, again, they don't understand, they can't enforce policy in a lot of cases. They are advisory types of services for a lot of implementations. Now, the legacy firewall is sitting in a prime spot. It sees all the traffic, it has the ability to enforce policy, but the problem is it's relatively stupid. It really only understands port, protocol, IP address as the things it's able to evaluate to make decisions. So while it can enforce policy and while it's sitting in a position that's enviable because it sees all the traffic, it doesn't have the wherewithal to enforce policy or to make intelligent policy decisions. Now, let's say we were going to stop data leaks at the firewall. Particularly, let's focus on personally identifiable information. Let's focus on credit cards, social security numbers, essentially the source of most of the problems that you see in the press. The first thing you got to be able to do is limit the avenues through which data can leak. And that really is about controlling applications. Decide what applications you want on your network. And if you look at those first three examples I gave, if you had simply controlled the applications, basically enforced the policy that the organization already had, then you would have prevented those kinds of leaks. So again, being able to control applications regardless of whatever evasive tactic that application might use to try to get around your control. The second thing you got to be able to do is scan the quote-unquote good applications, the applications that you do want on your network. You need to be able to scan them for credit cards and social security numbers. You need to be able to weight that scanning so you make sure that you don't get an alert every time someone buys something off of Amazon. And finally, you need to be able to do this over SSL as well. If you look at a lot of the deliberate kinds of leaks that you might see out there, a lot of them are going to use encryption to try to obfuscate what they're doing. The next thing you got to be able to do is bring the user into the picture. Policies that don't incorporate the user or the user group tend to be fairly inefficient in terms of serving the business. So you want to be able to say, okay, the marketing folks can use a particular application. The accounting folks need to be able to use the finance application, but you don't want to expose all these applications that might contain sensitive data to the entire organization that might not need to see them. The other piece that's important to bring the user in the loop for is if you look at a typical data leak, the first question that gets asked is, who done it? You want to be able to go and have the kinds of policy conversations with end users. You can say, hey, you know what, that's not an appropriate behavior. And essentially having the user in the picture gives you actionable information and enables the organization to go have that conversation with that user. By the way, all this has to be done in a high-performance fashion. Most of the applications that we're talking about here are real-time in nature, and delays, congestion, latency, completely unacceptable for real-time applications. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the technologies that Palo Alto Networks brings to bear for this particular problem. You look at App ID. This is our ability to identify applications. We currently identify over 750 applications. We add 3 to 5 per week. And really what we're talking about here is an ability to ferret out the identity of the application regardless of any sort of evasive tactic, whether it's port hopping, whether it's SSL encryption, doesn't matter. We're going to find out what it is. The second thing, and it's labeled number 3 here because that's the piece that the requirement we're hitting here, is bring in the identity of the user. So look at, in addition to what application, we want to be able to look at what user or what group of users. So we tie into Active Directory and harvest that information. The third thing here is a high-performance platform. And we're pretty well known for having a high-performance platform. We separate the data from the management plane, and within the data plane, we really focus on some key hardware components, basically dedicated processing for networking, security, and content ID scanning. And that's that last piece we'll talk about here is content ID. With PAN-OS 2.1, we announced a credit card and data and social security number canned data filter. So basically we have the ability to scan that application traffic for credit card and social security number. And it's really easy to do. It was fairly easy for us to add because we have this content ID scanning capability that scans application traffic, and adding things like credit card or social security number was actually fairly trivial. And we made it very easy for the end user as well. So we can add things like these canned filters for social security number and credit card. There's also some custom capability here. But one of the reasons why folks like Sonesta Hotels purchased this solution was they were able to very quickly and easily enforce this policy and put this policy in place in the firewall, which means instead of finding out about a potential problem after the fact, they're able to put a policy in place, again, in the firewall that ensures that problems don't even happen. So there's a policy at the firewall that says, okay, this is the kind of behavior that is appropriate for credit card and social security number, and this is the kind of behavior that's not. And again, you can see here that it's easy to add. You're talking about which applications, what kinds of files, what directions, and what constitutes an alert versus what constitutes a block. Just in summary, most organizations are aware that they need to be able to stop personal information leaks. A lot of the full-fledged DLP suites can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement, and most of that's not in technology. Most of that's in project and consultant time to try to figure out where the data is and how to deal with it. A lot of the existing security infrastructure can't help, and with PAN-OS 2.1, Palo Alto Networks introduces a pretty compelling feature. It's not full-fledged DLP, but what it is again that ability to control applications, that ability to scan the good applications for social security number and credit card and other types of confidential data, the ability to insert the user into the picture. It's easy to implement, it's fast, and again, back to one of the things that Sonesta Hotels really liked about the solution is it's proactive. You get in front of any potential problems rather than finding out about it later. And the best part for our customers is there is no cost to customers on maintenance. It's a free upgrade. So this kind of rolls right into an already compelling solution for a lot of enterprises. Thanks for listening.